Hello, guys, and welcome to my Week 7 NFL Sunday game predictions. And as always, we're going to start off with the earliest game, with that being the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the New England Patriots in London. There's just a couple things that I want to say regarding who I'm picking for this game. I think the Patriots are a team that while they lost 41-21 against CJ Stroud and the Texans last week, I think that there was a good amount of hope given to them, given that Drake May wasn't super foolish. He threw some beautiful footballs for touchdowns, and they seemingly have a QB that's going to be smart with the ball. And he played against, a pretty good defense in the Texans. So there's a lot, to be happy about despite it being a loss. And you look at Jacksonville, kind of under other end of the spectrum. You have a good amount of talent, but you just can't put it together. And then not to mention that it seems like the team gave up against the Bears in London last week. I don't know whether to believe that the team has gave up on Doug Peterson. I don't know whether the team was heavily discouraged by the fact that they were just getting blown out last week by the Bears, or maybe it's both. But if they don't win this game, I would be willing to bet money that Doug Peterson is fired. And with just the nature of like where these teams are at going into the 7th week in the season, I'm going to pick the Patriots. I never would have guessed before the year that I would be picking the Patriots over Jacksonville. But the culture of Jacksonville is so unbelievably bad that I'm forced to pick the Patriots, I would say. I'd say you'd have to be somewhat of a fool to pick Jacksonville. Unless they haven't quit on their coach. But until I know that, I'm picking against Jacksonville. And I think New England, I don't think they're going to score a ton of points. But I think they can score 24 points. And then I think Jacksonville, I think it's going to be an abysmal turnout. And I'm saying they're going to score 13. So New England by 10 in this game over in London. Moving on, we have the Seattle Seahawks visiting the Atlanta Falcons. So I think something similar with the Seahawks. They seem to be an up and down team, but I don't think it's because people don't believe in the coach or the administration or anything like that. I think it's because they're way too injured and their morale is kind of down and they're just unable to stop a lot. They have the number one passing defense, but how much of that is because teams are running at will at Seattle? And it doesn't help that they've had a good amount of injuries. And I mean, this week, they do have Jonathan Hankins, Leonard Williams, Jarran Reed, and a good amount of guys back. But I don't think it's as simple as putting it all together against a team that is built to run the football well with Atlanta. And it's in Atlanta, which I think is a, crazy hard place to play. Last week Algier and Bijan put on a clinic each having over 100 yards. I think that it's going to be very, I wouldn't say easy for them to do so against the Seahawks, just because they are getting more, they're getting healthier, for this game. But I am going to take Atlanta in this game, much to my dismay. As much as I would like Seattle to win, they've had a very off and on offense as well. I would say that Kenneth Walker not doing well, like they need him back. But then you also have, the passing game was rocky. And obviously they were playing their division rival, the Niners, last week. which I thought would be a closer game, but they didn't play well against them. And I would consider Atlanta to have better rushers, especially with the Niners not having McCaffrey. And I would say Bijan Robinson and Algier are poised to have a big game. So with that, I am taking Atlanta. I don't think they'll be scoring as much as they have been, but in their last, couple games where it's like they scored 38 and 36, and then even against New Orleans they scored 26. I'm going to take them. I think that they score 27 on the Seahawks. And the Seahawks, I think they score 20 in this game. But moving on, we have the Tennessee Titans and the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, as we know, playing a very kind of dormant game against the Jets, barely pulling out a win there, which was honestly kind of determined by the fact that Zuerlein missed a couple kicks that were doinks off the uprights. Wind or not, it's like, you're missing James Cook, and then you're also just not passing it very well. Don't get me wrong, it was better than the week before, where it's like Josh Allen had, 9 passes completed or whatever else, and their loss to Houston, who obviously is a very respectable team. And then you look at the Titans, they barely lost to Indy making it a game because they're also very off and on. But obviously Tennessee, unfortunately, just never been able to get their offense really going this year, in my opinion. They got it going against Miami, but that's not saying much considering the state that Miami is in. But it's like most of these other games, they're not scoring 20, which is not what you want. And I think they have a better offense than what is being shown to us. And I think it's just a few mistakes that Will Levis is making that is dooming the team ultimately. And if he can get past that, you can maybe win some more games, because your defense is pretty legit. I don't think they're going to be able to hold Josh Allen and the Bills, to be honest with you. You have James Cook back this week, thankfully, and then you added Amari Cooper via trade, which I think is, very, very good for them. I think he's been an underrated wide receiver his career, with his best QB up until Allen being Dak Prescott before he was traded from the Cowboys, which was very limited. He wasn't on that team very long. But I think Amari Cooper still has it. I think it's good that he got out of a terrible situation in Cleveland. And I think that people are going to realize that he's a wide receiver that still has it. Very good route running. People can say that he doesn't have good hands because he's got the most drops this year. I think it was a culture thing, and I think that he was sick of being on the Browns, which who wouldn't be with the way that their offensive production has been going. So maybe a little bit of rust does, in terms of like how the chemistry is going to be with Amari Cooper and Josh Allen, will have to be shaken off. But I think the Bills are definitely a much better team, and they're really ready to try and pull away from the rest of their division with, kind of the luck of the draw that they've been granted, with the Dolphins struggling and the Jets obviously not performing up to what people thought they would be this season. But I'm going with the Bills for this game, and I'm going to say that they score 31 points, and I think that Tennessee, they score 10. So Buffalo by 21. Moving on, we have Bengals Browns. To me, this game could get ugly because the Bengals haven't performed super well, and obviously the last game we saw them, they played against the Giants, and the Giants, would have had a shot to win if they hadn't given up like a 50-yard run from Burrow, which is crazy for me to be saying. Obviously, the Browns, like I've said, they've been struggling with Watson. They're not benching him, even though he should be benched. And it's just, one of those things that it's like, I think that, even with the research, with, uh, goodness, why am I, even with Chubb coming back, which, is maybe the only saving, grace for this game, which it's wild. They still say he's out on their depth chart, but I'm pretty sure it's well documented that he is coming back this game. And this is like the only, I mean, I'm not saying that they can turn the season around with him, but he is an electric player and one of the best backs in the league. Yeah, and a good run game would definitely help the Browns, which they've been lacking. They have serviceable guys, but they don't have. And it's like with the loss of Amari Cooper, they might even feel it a bit more. This might be the beginning of the end for Stefanski, in my opinion. I think he's very overrated as a coach, and from my outside perspective, not being a fan of this team, and it's like there's just so much going wrong. It's hard for me to pin it all to the quarterback, to be honest with you, but I am still going to go with the Bengals just because I think that, they can figure some things out and they can do better than they did last week. And I'm going to take them scoring 24, and the Browns I'm going to say score 20 or 13 in this game. But moving on, we have a huge game with the Houston Texans traveling to Lambeau Field to face my Green Bay Packers. Now, as everybody knows, this game has been marked on many, many, many people's calendars since it was announced. And obviously, there's been the debate that who's better, Stroud or Love. I'm not going to lie, it's one of those pointless debates to me where it's like you would be happy with either of these guys as your quarterback. Obviously, my guy's Love, so I'm biased, and I do think he's, maybe proved a little bit more, with what I would say would be, a deficit of star talent. Obviously, the big thing with this game is that the Texans are without Nico Collins, who is still, despite missing time, the leading yards receiver in the NFL. Now, obviously, it's coming to Lambeau. The Packers having their first kind of full circle win, I feel like, against Arizona, where it's like the offense clicked most of the game. The defense did a very good job of even containing Murray. You could say, I mean, obviously they were without the top target in that game too, of Marvin Harrison getting injured early with a concussion and that sort of thing. And then obviously the Texans last week winning against New England, and handling them pretty well. Now, and then the week before Buffalo, and then Jacksonville the week before that. Now, obviously, the Packers last three, lost to Minnesota by 2, beat the Rams by 5, and then beat Arizona by 21 points. So, looking at this, these two teams are off of very dominant point wins against, struggling teams, New England and then the Cardinals. I would say the Cardinals aren't in the same tier as New England, though, just because they've had some comeback wins and been competitive against better teams like the Niners. So it's like looking at this, obviously the Texans probably are like, oh, this is kind of a very big test for us because this defense that has the most takeaways in the league, is playing us and we do not have our top weapon. It's huge that Mixon is back. Nico Collins is good. I think that Diggs has kind of softened the blow of what Nico Collins' loss would have been last year, due to the fact that they didn't really have many other weapons besides Nico and Tank Dell and that sort of thing. So looking at this game, I think that it's going to be a test on like who's going to get more pressure on the quarterback. I think that you look at, stats and production, you'll look at the Texans, obviously. Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson They got after Drake May, who is behind an O-line that has struggled this year. And then you look at the Packers, and Rashawn Gary is still yet to get a sack this year. Getting chipped at a very high percentage is the only really rebuttal I have for that. Going into last week, he was the third most chipped player in the league, but you need to be able to generate some sort of pressure on QBs of this caliber. And I think that it doesn't solely come down to that. I think that, both teams are going to try and lean on the run to make it easier on their quarterbacks. The Texans with Mixon and the Packers with Jacobs, who are both, two great backs in the league. And overall, I kind of think to myself that I think my Packers are going to win this game. I think it kind I would, it would be kind of more of a 50-50 in my eyes if the Texans had Nico Collins, but I think that is a big blow to their team, as anyone would more than likely agree with me on it. And I think that, because, guys like Jair Alexander and the Packers have played against Diggs in the past, they kind of know him a little bit better. And he's had games where he's had limited production because of that familiarity. They know how he moves. They know how he likes to be used and utilized and that sort of thing. And so I think it's going to be a game of, who can surprise the other team more. And I think the Packers, with, the amount of weapons that we've had that have emerged and are healthy, that we, have a solid chance to win this game, especially at home. So I'm taking my Packers, and I'm taking them. I think that we score 31 points to the Texans. I'm going to say 27 points. But it would not surprise me in this game if it came down to whoever has the last possession, type of thing. Like, I don't think it's a sure win for either team, which is why it's such an enticing game. And that's but that is my prediction for my Packers hosting the Texans at Lambeau in week 7. Moving on, we have the Dolphins in Indianapolis. As we all know, the Dolphins not playing well. Tua still not playing. And overall, the Dolphins, it's kind of mind-boggling to me. Tyler Huntley looked a lot better when he was playing for the Ravens, when he would get subbed in because of Lamar's injuries in the past. And he goes to the Dolphins and he just can't perform, which I think is a credit to Tua. I would say him understanding the offense, knowing exactly where these guys are going to be. It is kind of harder to track two of the fastest dudes and know exactly where they are, because you could look, 1 second and the next second, oh, they're 15 yards away from where they were, leading to the Dolphins really struggling. I think that they can really have a dominant game this game, and the one kind of X factor that we don't really know about, obviously, is Anthony Richardson. Richardson is coming back after missing the last 2 games. The Colts, winning last week, winning last week, and then handing the only Jacksonville Jaguars win the week prior. And, Flacco hasn't had to play amazing, for them to, to have to win against Tennessee. But to me, that was their game to lose. And, they just got, I wouldn't say lucky, but they got bailed out based on the fact that the QB that they played has been struggling all year. So looking at this, I think that Richardson isn't going to have a good time trying to run around. I think that, against, a Titan or against a Miami team, I feel like they're a lot more they're a lot more stout on their line and linebacker core to where they're not going to let guys, run around too much. I think, I think that, I look at you know, the Dolphins, and I mean they've been playing kind of poor, defensively. And I mean, who's to know to say if it's because of their limited offensive production, maybe. But they've had a shaky defense for years despite having a lot of star talent. And, so with that, I mean, I do think that their linebacker core and D line is a lot better than like what their secondary has been doing, and I don't think Richardson is going to be able to just run around, type of thing. And I mean, at this point, it's like he keeps getting hurt because he keeps trying to play superhero. And even though he's a bigger guy, he keeps suffering these injuries. So it's like, I think that he's going to be a bit more conservative on the run so that he can actually finish out the season. Because I think that that's very important for him. If you grow into the third year and you have a guy who hasn't played, you know, at least half the games of the last 2 years, and you're starting to wonder, like, how patient are we going to be with this guy? When you've got guys like Flacco that are coming in and they're playing sound and accurate, and you're seeing that you can win games that way. So it's kind of, a bizarre situation. And I think it makes it hard to kind of predict this game, though, in a sense. But I'm still going to go with the Colts. I think that they have that big play potential. And I do believe Richardson will figure it out. I think he's too athletic. I think that, the fact that they're going to have to play, to where they're not forcing the pressure on him, and they're going to have to contain him, is going to play to his advantage and help him to develop his arm against a secondary that is just shaky, in my opinion. So looking at this, I'm going to take the Colts, and I'm going to say the Colts, they win 20-13 against the Dolphins. Moving on, we have another huge game. The Detroit Lions going to go visit the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota, of course. The Vikings coming off of a bye. They are undefeated still, and obviously the Lions, as we all know, just beat the living crap out of the Cowboys, where they kept on trying to score with linemen. And I'm not going to lie, even as a Packers fan, I was hoping they scored with Penei Sewell with the hustle that he made on his, what was a potential touchdown on that play. But looking at this game, I'm definitely leaning towards Lions, because I think that even though the Vikings are coming off of a bye, they were having a kind of rocky time. They were having a rocky time these last couple games. And I think that that's kind of going to be the difference. The Lions clearly coming off, a surging win and 3 straight wins, where it's like against Seattle, it was a shootout, that they won by 13 points. And then against Dallas, obviously winning by, high 30 amount of points. And then Arizona, they only won by 7. But, really the only game to me that they've, struggled offensively was against Tampa Bay, their only loss, where they lost by 4. But I think that with these teams being so familiar with each other, I really think that Campbell is going to come up with some type of way to, cover what Hutch brought to the team, and to make sure that the defense is, pretty safe. And it's like, if this had happened last year, it would be a really big blow. It'd be really bad with how bad their secondary was, but they got better secondary players. And overall, I think the Lions are just, they're really poised. Even without Hutch, I think they're still a team that is to beat. And even though it's in Minnesota, I think that the Lions would like nothing more than to take the one spot in the division, where it's going to be a thrilling end of the year, where the NFC North is going to be decided mostly by these divisional games, more than likely, because of how stacked the division is this year. So, looking at this, I think the Lions, I think that they score 35 in this game. And I think that the Vikings, I'm going to say that they score 26, coming off the bye, because I really think that the Lions believe that they can run just about any play they want, and it's going to work. And there's no way that any team is prepared to deal with all that they're going to throw at them with an offense that's really clicking and just, crazy good offensive coordinator. So I think, this is definitely the Vikings game to lose, obviously, in a sense that, like, oh, you're coming off a bye. But with the Lions and the momentum that they have, I think, they're going to come out with a win on Sunday. So moving on, we have the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants. Obviously, an NFC East divisional game. The Eagles, as I said last week, Sirianni, you can't tell me that he is not on a hot seat. He's being kind of brash. He's being indifferent with the fans. He didn't call a crazy game. People are like, oh, well, these guys were coming back. They need to shake off the rust. And it's like, you had a bye week, and then all these guys come back. You get healthy. Goddard does get hurt, during the game, and he's questionable this game, but overall, like I said last week, it wasn't a convincing win. It was against, a terrible Browns team. And then you look at the Giants, and they competed against Cincinnati, who the 2 games before playing, the Giants had been blowing everybody out. Or, I mean, not blowing everybody out, but, dominating all the defenses that they had played. If you had told me that they would have dominated in games where, they played some of these teams that it's like the Ravens, where it's like the Ravens, had the number 1 defense last year, and they had done what they did, and then they didn't against the Giants a week later, I would have thought, you're crazy if I didn't watch the game or whatever else. But, ultimately, looking at this game, it's obviously another game where you have all your guys back, Smith, Brown, and then obviously the addition of Barkley this offseason. But then, the defense, is obviously to me, they just played against, a Deshaun Watson that was way too conservative. And, they were way too conservative on the Browns side. And it's like, who's to say that, the Giants are going to be aggressive? You have Malik Neighbors back from concussion protocol. That is huge. People are still saying Daniel Jones isn't that good of a QB, even though without his top target and the guy they needed to draft because they have been lacking talent and his best weapon being Darius Slayton, I think that he's playing, better football where it's not riddled with mistakes all over the place, and they didn't even really have that good of a run game last week. They had Tyrone Tracy starting. They also get Devin Singletary back. I think that the Eagles have had somewhat of a shaky run defense where it's very off and on. They either seem to get a stuff or they're gouged, and, for people that were preaching how good the defense was going to be, I think that it could be better, and you barely squeeze by against the Browns. And, you look at the offensive game plan that the Eagles had last week. I mean, they didn't run the football well, and it was a bunch of toss-ups to Brown and Smith. And don't get me wrong, Brown had a bunch of yards. He did save the offense, but it still wasn't very pretty to me. And you're going up against a defense that is playing well. So I'm going with the Eagles on a sheer, I think that they can get it together type of standpoint. And I think that The Giants are still trying to, you know, learn and deal with the fact that they don't have much talent. But good golly, this, if the Eagles are not dominating the Giants this game, it's still leaving me with, oh, they have unresolved issues in their offense and their star-studded offense that has, as far as I'm concerned, top 5 potential at every level. Like AJ Brown, Goddard's always been good. Saquon Barkley could be a top 5 back. Devonta Smith, not top 5, but he's up there. He's a deadly wide receiver. That's made his fair share of catches in his young career. And it's like, not to mention, you still have Jalen Hurts, who it's like, I thought, would be kind of better at this point in his career. But his progression seems to have hit either a ceiling or the offensive play calling is bad. Who knows? All of the above, potentially. But I'm still going with the Eagles just because of a talent standpoint. And I think that the Giants, they can, limit and they're feisty, but I just don't think they have the talent. But looking at this game, I expect it to kind of be a low scoring game. And I'm going to go with the Eagles, and I think that they score 20. And I think the Giants score 14. And that's my prediction for this game. Now, moving on to Raiders Rams. Obviously, it's a very good thing that the Raiders got rid of Davante Adams. They were playing with some fire and that sort of thing. In recent weeks, maybe not. I do think that they were playing with a little bit of fire against Denver, a couple weeks ago, even though they ended up getting blown out. They were leading that game like 10-0. And, they obviously, that's like kind of minimal fire. Maybe I'm overestimating them a little bit. But it's like, without Adams, what the heck are you going to do offensively? Your run game has not been good, and it's going to be even harder seeing as you don't have a perennial threat. Obviously, the thing that I will say is that Brock Bowers he's been, very, very good. And he's not like a proven name yet, but he's very good. But you look at this and it's like Zamir White, Jacoby Myers are both banged up, and that sort of thing. And it's like, at wide receiver, goodness, they have 4 wide receivers, that are healthy. And Jacoby Myers isn't fully healthy, and then looking at the defense, Crosby's still questionable, hampering his injury, for multiple weeks now. I still, he's obviously the best guy on that defense, no question, and it's about it. But it's like, without like Christian Wilkins obviously having gone on IR, like who the heck does this team have? And that sort of thing. So it's like, this is just kind of a talentless team to me. And they're obviously starting Aiden O'Connell, who it's like, there's no way this guy is your due to the future unless some drastic thing happens where he starts to miraculously perform. I don't see it. And then, looking at the Rams, Cooper Kupp is questionable, but I'm sure he is playing. But just from a QB standpoint, Stafford, continues to make throws and put his guys in positions to succeed. And Kyren Williams, even though he was really running over my Packers, I got a lot of respect for him. And I think he's another guy who has emerged as a staple of this offense, against an O-line that is banged up. But looking at this, I'm going to say the Rams are going to win when they, host the Raiders at SoFi. And I think they have a chance to score quite a bit unless Crosby hard carries that defense. So looking at this, I'm going to say that I think the Rams, they score 20. And I'm going to say that the Raiders don't score a touchdown. Then they put up 6 points. Moving on, we have Panthers in Washington. I don't think much to cover in this. The Panthers have been a mightily struggling team, obviously, this year. Their only win coming to the Raiders. You know, when Andy Dalton took over, I believe, and they've put up, you know, a couple of 20 and 24-point games in their last three, but they obviously got slapped by Chicago and they didn't look good. And you go up against the Commanders, who are you know, have a new culture, and they, you know, kept at least a close game against Baltimore last week, and Jaden Daniels looks like the real deal. So with that, I'm gonna say Washington wins, and I'm gonna say that they do a very convincing win of 28 touchdowns to, I'm gonna say, 7 points for Carolina. Now, moving on, we have another huge game where it's like, oh, to really prove who is legit, and it's Kansas City and San Fran. This game kind of reminds me a little bit of how the Lions needed a revenge game against, you know, Dallas, who was struggling this year. The only difference to me is that the Niners want revenge for the Super Bowl, obviously, and to kind of, you know, maybe start to try and get ahead in their division. But the Chiefs are still the Chiefs, despite all the injuries they have. And looking at them, I think as long as you have Mahomes, Kelsey, and Jones, you're always going to be a contender. And you're going to be able to do good things, you know, for your team, regardless of who you have at wide receiver. And I think that, you know, they really have shown that, you know, this year. It's like you got Xavier Worthy's fully healthy, Juju's got the lingering issue, and then Justin Watson. I could care less. They do a very good job. They do a very good job of, you know, executing what they want to execute with a great Andy Reid scheme. And then the defense. I mean, it isn't just Chris Jones. And it's like, you look at San Fran, and it's like Jennings is now kind of banged up. And, you know, Deebo Samuel a little banged up, and Jordan Mason a little banged up. So, you know, maybe it's the Purdy Kittle show, maybe it's the Purdy Ayuk show, but I personally think that they're going to stick McDuffie on Ayuk as their best receiving threat. Obviously, Deebo has had a little bit more work in the backfield because he can do that. But I think that, you know, I think Ayuk gets eliminated by McDuffie. And I think that you look at, you know, the running attack for San Fran, and I think it's going to be tough against a well-coached Chiefs defense. So with that, I am taking the Chiefs to win this game because they had a bye week, they rested. I wouldn't say they got like crazy healthier or anything like that, but it's like, you know, the other thing that I think about with their defense is that, you know, their defense is fully healthy besides Mike Donna, who is out. But, you know, they've got skilled players at every single level, and I think that they're going to cook. And the other thing that I would say about this that many people don't know or maybe haven't heard is that the Niners had to sign Anders Carlson because yet again they had another kicker that got hurt after Jake Moody, their starting kicker, got hurt early in the season. So Anders Carlson, unless he's fixed his craft, unless, you know, there isn't any trouble there, missed a lot of field goals last year, and it included extra points. So looking at this, I think that's just another aspect that many people wouldn't think about. But obviously the Chiefs have, you know, their kicker Butker, and he's won plenty of games for them, which I think is just another leg up. You know, you got the trifecta: solid defense, Hall of Fame quarterback, and clutch kicker. which is what you'll want on a team on a championship winning team. So looking at this, I'm gonna say the Chiefs aren't gonna score a ton of points, but I think that they put up 26, and I'm gonna say the Niners put up 24. Because while, you have a great defense, unless you have a bunch of turnovers on the Niners, I still don't think you're going to be able to crazy limit them, unless you're somehow able to have long drives on the Kansas City offense. But moving on to Sunday night, we have Jets visiting the Steelers for a short trip to Pittsburgh. So looking at this game, I'll say this right away. The Pittsburgh Steelers are starting Russell Wilson, which to me, I think it is a huge mistake. I think that people saying that Fields has sucked, and from what I'm seeing, that they think that Russell Wilson is going to perform a lot better against that shoddy O-line that only seems to run the football, seemingly well every now and again with two very good backs and Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. I think that you're talking about a game where it is going to come down to Russell Wilson. As far as I'm concerned, with the Jets acquiring Davante Adams, that means that they are going to be able to more easily take out the pass rush of TJ Watt. And what I mean by that is that you are going to get a lot of quick releases from Rodgers to Adams. As much as people are saying that, like, oh, he just needs, all of his guys. Oh, his boyfriend is back on the team. It's a bunch of nonsense. This was the most feared QB to wide receiver tandem for years. And even Adams proved that he didn't even need Rodgers. And, the first year that he did it with Derek Carr, and, posting up 1,400 and 14 touchdowns and what have you. And then having this wild QB carousel with bad coaching, terrible culture, and just inconsistency at quarterback. I think people are in denial because they forgot how crazy deadly, Davante and Rodgers was. Where it's like there was only, like one team, as far as I'm concerned, that was really able to put a stop to it. And that was the Niners consistently with, the last few seasons with Davante and Rodgers on Green Bay. And, without the Niners, we would have been seeing, Rodgers and Adams in the Super Bowl. And you can't tell me otherwise, and I think that, to be honest, I think that they have a better offense than the Packers had during those times. You obviously had Adams and Rodgers, but it was a lot of older guys, and they didn't yet have Watson and Dobbs who came after the Adams trade and did fairly well with Rodgers in his first year on Green Bay before, he left. And, you have Garrett Wilson, who is a legit number one, but the chemistry hasn't been there. He's dropped a number of passes. And if we were all watching the same game, the Jets win that game if they have, the two field goals that, shouldn't have been as hard as I feel like they were. And then a drop pass from, I believe, Garrett Wilson and maybe even someone else in the end zone that game. And people are saying that Rodgers is washed. He's old. He's not as good. Oh, he's not able to do it. He's still able to do it. And the arm strength is obviously there. For him to be able to still lob it up, arch that thing so that it's coming close to straight down, so that it's an easier ball to catch and basket catch and pull down in, he still has it. And people, I think, are just in denial over it. And it's like, you can't even tell me that I am a Rodgers, fanboy. I still believe in him. I still think he's one of the guys you want if you're going to go for a Super Bowl in the league. And, I think that despite the Jets being 2-4, I think in a few weeks we could have a different narrative if they're really able to dominate these teams. And I think that it's actually kind of a crazy thing that they go up against a Steelers team where the defense, besides 1 week out of the season, has been dominant and been very, very, very good this year. And obviously, you kind of expect that with TJ Watt. Like, their record without him is it's crazy low because he's an MVP caliber player on the defense. So, looking at this game, I will say this. Because they're starting Russell Wilson, I think that they're going to lose. I don't think Russell Wilson is going to be up to the challenge to play a Steelers defense that, you know, their weakness has been the run. And that might be the one thing that really helps Russell if they do get Harris and Warren going. But I just don't see how Russell Wilson completes a good amount of passes or passes downfield with his shaky O-line and outscores Aaron Rodgers and the Jets after a very shaky game and clearly better play calling, which I think, you know, could only get better with more weapons or, you know, a much better weapon with Davante Adams. So I'm going to take the Jets in this game, and I'm going to say that they win. I'm going to say that they win 27-16, an 11-point victory for the Jets. Now, if any of you have any comments over what I've said about any of these games, I would love and appreciate if you did comment. If you liked the video, you know, give me a like, subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that as well. But I want to thank you all for watching. And as always, go Pack Go.